Before I introduce today's guest, I would like to acknowledge the land that this podcast is currently being recorded on. This land is Tongva land, and I wish to share my gratitude and respect for the past, present, and future generations of the Tongva people. Today's guest is Jessica Barudin. Jessica is a proud mother of 2 daughters, a wife, sun dancer, Indigenous health researcher, educator, yoga teacher, and community wellness practitioner. She has spent over a decade working professionally in Indigenous people's health and education, including roles in community-based research, education, health promotion, Indigenous public health, and trauma healing. Welcome to the podcast, Jessica.
Thank you, Ali. Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you. I would love for you to introduce yourself. When I was looking at your bio online, I mean, you are so accomplished. You have done so much. You are so educated. I didn't even know where to start in introducing you, but I know that you introduce yourself so beautifully. So I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you. Qeila Kasla, Qeila Kastokla, Nugwa Amlat Sutlas, Hetman Ligami, Jessica, Nugwa Amlat Sutlas, Tlu Ananque, Gaiuchanach Namgris, Tlu Chwatmis, Tlu Quagyot, Tlu Ashkenazi Jewish, Yuklanlach Yelis, Qeila Kasla, Awinakwisachas Nanemok, yeah, Mutlanoke. I'm really grateful. My heart is grateful. I'm happy to see you and have this conversation with you. So I introduce myself in Kwakwala. So on my maternal side, I'm Kwakwakwak and descend from the Hawatmis and the Namgis and Kwagyot tribes. And on my paternal side, my father was Ashkenazi Jewish and born in New York City. And currently living in Alert Bay, which is northern Vancouver Island. And presently I am in Snuneymuxw territory, which is colonially known as Nanaimo. So happy to be here and en route to Vancouver. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. I love hearing you speak your language, and I love hearing the way you introduce yourself. And I'm curious for you. You do so many things. We met years ago in New York City at a Girlvana yoga training that you attended. And I was so struck by how deeply present you are and how profound of a student and learner you are. And I know you are also a teacher. And so you know what that means when someone shows up and they are present and they are ready to learn. So that was the first thing that struck me. And then you had your family with you and your 2 little girls who are maybe not as little anymore. And they would come at the end of the training, and I would I observed mothers a lot because I would like to be one day. And they would come in at the end of the training, and I think you were maybe still breastfeeding your youngest. And I just loved watching the way you were mothering and being a student and a teacher and a wife, sort of all at once. And I know it maybe doesn't seem effortless maybe to you, but the way it seemed to me was just you were just in beautiful communication with all parts of yourself and all parts of the roles that you play. And I'll just never forget that. It had a really deep impact on me.
Oh, thank you. That's a really beautiful compliment. And I don't always feel that way, but I strive for that as a mom, and motherhood is very challenging. And I'm blessed with 2 beautiful daughters, Leela, Starlight, and that's my youngest, who I was nursing at the time, and Maya Sequoia, who is now 10. She's a tween. Oh my goodness, it's crazy. But I really love that experience in New York City with you at the Girlvana training, and I took so much out of that. And I was reflecting on it last night, just thinking about maybe what we would talk about today, and how much I've grown since then, and how much I've learned during that stage of my life until where I'm at now. So yeah, thank you for being part of my journey.
Yeah, and likewise, I heard you say in maybe a different interview that motherhood is a reason for living for you, and that your children chose you. And I'm curious if you can elaborate on that a little bit more. This idea that our children choose us.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, doesn't come from my own mind. I've heard it several times from different teachers, different elders in my life. And, I truly believe that my children have come into my life for a specific purpose and vice versa. And whether we've met lifetimes ago, we are so connected, and they teach me as much as I teach them, and we really support each other. And my husband, Vincent, as well. We're very, tight knit, and so much has happened in our time as this little family unit. And from the time even when I first became pregnant with my daughter Maya, I was in grad school, and that was the same time that my mother had been diagnosed with cancer, with cervical cancer and breast cancer. And it was this difficult period of coming to terms with, the relationship with my mother, her health that was rapidly declining, while also growing this new life inside of me. So there was this journey of becoming a mother and healing this relationship with my own mother. And then, a few years later, down the road, when we became pregnant with my second daughter, my mother was still fighting on her battle with fighting her cancer. And difficult journey. She went through a lot of surgeries, a lot of treatments, and towards the later stage of her battle. And just right when Vince and I got married, at our wedding, my mother was there, and she was still in good spirits, and she was still in good health, and well, relatively, just really excited about our big wedding day. And we got married in Ucluelet Beach in Ucluelet. And she said at her speech when we were, just finished our vows and had a few words, she said, and I want more grandbabies. And that was like her big wish. And, a couple days later, we were driving down the highway, and I was feeling really nauseous and just really like, oh, this isn't from the wedding, this, like, what the heck? So we go to the pharmacy. I was like, okay, I'm going to take a pregnancy test because this just doesn't feel like normal car sickness or whatever. And then we get back to the hotel and we take the pregnancy test. And then I find out that I'm pregnant. And I called up my mom right away and I said, hey, Mom, your wish came true. And she was just so ecstatic. She was so happy. And so there's this beautiful, unexpected but joyful pregnancy announcement and connection. And then also just during that time, during my pregnancy, she did pass. And so it was this period of connection to my own mother and my maternal line especially, and how my relationship with my daughters have really helped to heal and nourish me. And we're really, healing this generational pain and disruption and connection. So that has been something where I feel, just at least in our family unit, that they have chosen me, and vice versa.
Thank you for sharing that. I have full body chills, and I think the relationships that we keep with our mothers, whether they are here in the present or not, and even if they're amazing or beautiful or not, they are complicated. And I and I think that it gets even more sort of in your face when you do have your own children, especially daughters. And I could imagine you grow a deeper respect for your own mother, and feel the patterns and the generations sort of pouring through you as you step into motherhood. And now you have a tween, which is amazing. And I'm curious, what are they like, these two little girls? Do they feel like, are they like little reflections of you? Do they have a similar personality? Are they like your mother? Or who do they reflect, sort of? Are they just completely their own little individuals?
I think all of that. Like, they are 100% their own individuals, very unique, very spunky, but they have these little glimmers of, you know, my parents or my husband and his mother. And, we see these little traits and these little quirks and neuroses that kind of pop up, and it just kind of makes us laugh. Um, yeah, and they're just so much fun. They are really wonderful in so many ways, and yeah, and just reflecting too, even going back to the Girlvana training, I remember, I think it was day one of the training, and I remember you getting into, we're going to be doing some journaling and we're going to be working through these things, our relationship to our teenage self. And you're like, and we're going to be talking about the mother wound. And I was like, oh God, it's like, I don't know if I want to go there. But since that time, and just kind of reflecting on your first question about connection and choosing our parents, I also feel I chose my own mother, and I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't have her in my life. And so, even though she wasn't able to see the birth of my daughter, my youngest daughter, there's these traits that are so similar to her, and her siblings all see this resemblance. So, yeah, like they are their own unique beings, and it just, their spirits are connected to their ancestors.
Mm. How do you balance it all? You have two children, a husband, you have done so much schooling, you're so committed and a big presence in your community. Your work is so varied. Can you, maybe we'll start here, can you explain the work that you do in the world, because you do so much, and then how do you do it all?
Well, yeah, I don't balance it all that well all the time, if I'm being fully honest. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I do a lot of different things, and they all intersect. They all
Yeah.
come together, and there's a common thread. So it doesn't feel like I'm scattered and kind of, jumping from hoop to hoop, or getting out of the mentality or mindset. It all really comes together, and there's these threads of connection to who I am and where I come from, and this, deep respect for my lineage, for my maternal lineage, and the community that I live in and am connected to. And so the work from there, it all comes from that place. And for my daughters to have a place and to know who they are and where they come from. So a big part of my time and energy and my heart is connected to the women in my community, the women in my family, and to the other tribes, the other Kwakwaka'wakw and other First Nations peoples on Vancouver Island and beyond. And so that's always been a big inspiration for me, is to really connect and support women and girls. And the way that I've really found my tools and my skills is through creating safe spaces and, brave spaces for connection with ourselves, with our own, physical bodies, emotional bodies, and then creating these sort of unseen layers of connection to each other that maybe already exist through kinship ties, but our communities are very complex and nuanced in the way that our kinship structures are. And, not everybody likes each other, just like anywhere else, right? And so sometimes we get into spaces and there's a lot of, there can be some disharmony between families or relationships with individuals. And so, it's creating this atmosphere that allows people to just let their shoulders drop and allow their themselves to take a deeper breath and move beyond those, squabbles or whatever that might be. And that's what I love. That's where I feel the most full, the most sure of who I am, is when I'm in company with other women and we're talking about wellness. We're talking about strategies of taking care of ourselves and our children and our loved ones. And then we're able to dream, we're able to vision about ways that we can improve our communities and can improve the health and well-being and creating, thriving, vibrant nations is really the goal. And so that's part of it. The other, sort of roles that I have, I just started as an assistant professor at UBC in the School of Community and Regional Planning. So that's my full-time my full-time job, and the focus is in Indigenous community planning. So you can kind of see, where that immediate connection. Women are the foundation, the backbone of our communities, and what we do as planners, as nurturers, and taking care, of not taking away from men or other people in the community, but we do have always been organized and planning ahead seasonally, and always taking care of the family and the language, and thinking futuristically. So that's where that connection ties. The other things that I do, I'm involved with politics in my community. So I am an elected council member of the Nunavut First Nation, and that takes up a lot of time. So it does get stressful, and it has been a learning curve, but it's been really eye-opening to sort of have a lot of formal training and sort of higher education around things like the Indian Act and how colonization has impacted our communities, but to sort of be at a table where we get to, with the guidance of community, make decisions and take action where we can, and plan for things to better our community. That is something that has been a newer role for me. And it's interesting how it goes beyond just health. And we're talking about rights and title and connection to our territory and protection and safeguarding of the resources in our territory. And, it all connects again. It's that sort of spiral of thinking of our immediate sort of needs and family, and our extended families and our nation, communities, into the territory. So that's what I mean with it. It all really connects. And I hope that the work that I'm doing now all sort of nourishes into the next role, so that I'm able to switch my frame of reference or my lens, but it always comes from a place of being rooted, as my role as a mother and as a member of my community.
Hmm. Yeah, I love this. I love how we started with motherhood, and as it sort of weaves its way through the work that you do, because ultimately we're all trying to leave the world a better place for this next generation, and how important it is, especially for little girls and young women, to see women like you in the world that are providing so deeply in such a holistic way to your community. And I'm curious how your work has been received as you bring wellness tools, yoga into Indigenous communities. What did that look like for you, maybe as you discovered yoga, discovered the practice for yourself, and how it weaves with your own traditions, your own culture, and then the decision to bring it to your community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a journey. And for me, I started my yoga practice when I was a teenager. Just being curious about, meditation. And I think I had like a Rodney Yee video VHS was my first meditation practice that I tried. And it was like a hatha yoga practice. I was really curious, and I was thinking the whole time, like, I don't know if I'm doing this right, just really in my head. And got into more of the physical practice. And Vancouver, as you know, the Vancouver yoga scene has continued to change over the years. But then it was a lot of Bikram's yoga and big box yoga kind of starting on that scene. So that was really the entry point for me, and just volunteering at some of the yoga studios and being really curious about the teachers and how they were representing themselves. And I've thought, that's really interesting. And the more that I connected with some of the teachers, the deeper the experience I could have with my own physical body and my own sort of consciousness, and sort of feeling a lot of different sensations that I hadn't really felt before. And, developing as a teenager into, a young adult, it was quite profound for me. And it really helped me on my journey and navigating a lot of big changes. I moved a lot. I moved from Vancouver back to my home community, and then from there I was like, hey, I always wanted to move to the East Coast, and I moved to New York, and from there went to grad school in Montreal and was there for several years. So a lot of big transitions, a lot of big life changes, and so that constant thread of coming back to a yoga practice as regularly as I could really helped me navigate a lot of those challenges. And during those times, I lost my father when I was a teenager, and went through usual heartbreaks and breakups and things. And so it really supported me through a lot of grief and a lot of, processing of different things. And it wasn't until grad school that I started to really feel this sense of disconnect to spirit and culture and land, because I was so far from my home territory, from my family. And that's when I had met some elders in Montreal who were not from Montreal. One was Jean Stevenson, who is Cree, and her husband, Albert Sampson, who is Shuswap. And we met them, and my husband and I, that's when he came to Montreal, and that's when I was just early in my pregnancy, and we started with a talking circle with them. And I remember through that, we had a chance for really deep prayers and expressing really vulnerable sides of what was going on. And I really, really came to this full realization of just feeling a deep yearning and loss and sort of hurt of not being home and not being connected to culture. And even though I was on this path of higher education, there's so much sacrifice to get there. And that sacrifice was, so here I am learning French, and I'm not learning Kwakwa, and I'm not learning more about my people,
Yeah.
and it's not feeling applicable. And so that's when I started to really have this parallel path of, not only yoga as a resource for me personally, and then that's when my husband had really brought Ram Dass into my life, and starting to think more spiritually and connected to these elders. And then they really brought us under their wing and brought us into spiritual communities and different opportunities, which led us to the Sundance, and which really culminated and strengthened this path for me to set my mind and open the door for more teachers and more beautiful community people to be in my life, and helped to put us on this path to get back home. And so that's where, this sort of culmination of combining my research. I didn't mention that I had just finished my doctoral research, and that's the focus, is really how can we bring yoga to First Nations women in particular, and what is the impact? So that's been the journey, and I can talk a little bit more about that, but kind of that's where it has been, and where it continues to evolve, those parallel paths that are connected in many ways, that connect us to spirit.
Mm. Yeah, I am curious what the impact has been when you are teaching these women yoga. What have you seen in your work?
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes a lot of resistance, sometimes not always as much enthusiasm or interest as you'd hope. Sometimes, as yoga teachers, great to have a class full of people. It's great to have enthusiastic learners, like you mentioned, who are fully present. But sometimes it happens where you might just only have a handful of people, or sometimes the timing's not right. Just this past couple of weeks, we had this workshop in my community in our beautiful cultural center, the Umista. And we have this potlatch collection there that, has so much history, and with these beautiful masks that were carved and were seized and have their own stories and histories. And it's this amazing representation of our big houses, where I was able to set up this beautiful space for breath work and meditation and connection. And I really put so much love in, and the timing, I think, was probably my own fault. So, just speaking with the director, we really had this intention of creating spaces over the holidays, which can be very challenging for our community, our people. Christmas time is always brings up a lot of difficulties, a lot of losses happen around this time of year, especially, and just that darkness of this time of year before the light sort of starts coming back. And so the first week, we didn't get any signups, and it was just after sort of Boxing Day. And I was like, well, people are still in the holiday buzz, so we'll try for the following week we had scheduled. And, the first class, there was only a handful of people who came from another community, some of my students and dear friends. And what was beautiful was one was one of my friends, and she brought her mother and her newborn baby. And so here's this beautiful example of intergenerational healing and that acknowledgement of their connection and their own relational work that they're doing, and self-care work and community connection. But, there was no one from the community that made it that day. And, it's still just right after New Year's, was like January 2nd. More people had expressed they would come the following day. But then we had lost one of our big chiefs. Tlaquaquila Chief Bill Kramer had just passed. And so we have to really respect our ways, our protocols. And when there's death in the community, which there is often death, we have to be very still and calm and kind of not do anything. There's no singing or dancing. We really have to be mindful of that spirit of death. So that's been sort of and a small example, but of how things often go in communities. We're often having to postpone or reschedule because of crisis or tragedy and loss. And when it has worked well, especially with the cohorts that we've had with our First Nations Women's Yoga Initiative, there has been a lot of interest and a lot of curiosity, and I would say a lot of courage of the women that I've had the privilege of working with, who step into these spaces. And it's really a slow process of connecting with and feeling safe in their own bodies. And that takes time, and that takes a lot of patience, and sometimes it's a little bit scary, especially if we've experienced various degrees of trauma. So it's been like that. It's been very sensitive, and it's been heartfelt, and a lot of tears, and creating a lot of space for debriefing and processing. It's a lot more than just your typical yoga class, going to a studio in the city or anywhere. You're not there to just be a fly on the wall or anonymous and get in, get out. You're there, and it gets deep. And when we're working with we have elders. One of our elders, Vera Newman, she had joined as our knowledge keeper and fluent speaker. It's a lot of this intergenerational friendships and relationship building. And again, that word kinship, I keep sharing these connections that are strengthened by having people like, an elder fluent speaker present who can, change the whole vibe, who can change the whole way that we sit up maybe a little straighter, or that we listen a little bit more deeply, and we want to learn, and we want to hear what she has to say and how she reflects on teachings of yoga or her experiences. And she's traveled to India, or how this Kwakwala word means so much more than how we can understand with our English minds. So that's been a bit of the journey, and it's been full, it's been rich, and I've created and nurtured some really beautiful friendships that have kind of grown from these spaces that I'm forever grateful for.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and giving us a little peek inside of your world and this work. And I'm always so struck by the way in which women come together and how it heals the world. And you sort of spoke to it in a political sense. You're speaking to it on a matriarchy sense. You're speaking to it as women coming together and being in their bodies. And what we know about that is it's not easy always to be in our bodies, and I think we take it for granted in the Western world, and certainly late stage capitalism and patriarchy and white supremacy is such that, we've been sold this idea of yoga as like, put on your tight, stretchy pants and get on your yoga mat and do a handstand. And we're missing the point. And to me, the point of yoga is the opening, right? And so to tell someone or to share with someone to slow their breath down, maybe close their eyes, is revolutionary. And it seems simple in theory, but it's quite deep. And I'm sure you've witnessed many moments, and myself included, that even a simple breath can then bring the tears and bring the emotion close to the surface, because to slow down enough to pay attention to oneself is so healing. And it is brave. A lot of us don't want to do that because we simply don't want to feel what is there, and what is underneath the surface. And so to have someone like you that is willing to hold that space, I just think and I just know the way you hold space is so beautiful. So thank you for doing the work that you do. And I'm curious about your own practices, because it takes a lot to show up to hold the space. What are you doing in your own life that is sustaining you from the inside out, as teacher, as mother, as professor?
Yeah, you're right. It's terrifying to show up, to do the work, and creating these spaces to not only do that on an individual level, but to do that in community. Um, it does take a lot of intention and a lot of you know creating that nurturing energy and space. So for my own practice, I'm so grateful to have done the breathwork training with you and George. That really, I think, moved my practice, moved the dial a little bit more. I would say, like, it helped me to tap into breath in a more profound way.
Yeah.
Especially the active breathwork practice has really helped me understand just how powerful our breath really is. Not only to just have the down regulating, the calming medicine that comes from our breath when we sit and we take deep breaths and we observe it and become aware, and also start to work with calming and trying different techniques. That has been something that I've had available through pranayama and learning more about yoga. But the active breathwork really has helped me to move through, I'd say, stagnant emotion that builds. Like with everyone, it really, sometimes we accumulate things, we're not always aware. On my path, for many years, my husband and I and our daughters, we were part of different spiritual communities, like I had mentioned, and part of the Native American church for a while, and still connected to a lot of community members there. That had helped. And I would say that breath work, not being a part of it now where we are, and not being part of that sort of active community, has helped to kind of move things in a more, yeah, I don't know. I can't really, it's hard to put to words, right? Like, 'cause these experiences are so deep and
Yeah.
so rich, the way
Yeah.
that you connect on different layers, not only your physical sensations, but your emotional body and your spiritual body. Like, I really have had some profound spiritual connections and realizations while doing these breathwork practices. So that's one, and just sort of use it accordingly, right? Because it is medicine, and I think we need to be mindful of how much we're sort of self-prescribing or doing these things. But so every day a bit of breath work, and for myself, movement has always been a really important aspect of my life, since I was a kid and I had those VHS tapes. I had all kinds. So just, exercise, and I love asana. And so getting back to that regular sadhana, I love, when I have my morning sadhana, my morning spiritual practice, that helps really keep my vessel pure and clean. And there's other ways that are not just the yogic teachings that help me, but bringing in my own cultural, rooting and foundations through prayer and kwakwa, that I've been really dedicated to improving and learning more of how to express myself in a prayerful way. And that for me is not just, sitting on my mat or sitting at home and in the morning and taking care of my mind that way, but also through our ceremonies that we have, which, requires sometimes a lot of discipline of getting in and going into the ocean and praying in the ocean or praying in rivers and doing that periodically. I do it committed to every season change. And sometimes if things feel heavier, I'll go at a full moon time and do that. But usually around when the seasons change, committing to 4 days of cleansing. And yeah, trying to write, trying to do a lot of journaling, but that practice has fallen off a little bit. And walking and just kind of keeping relationships with my husband, my sister, and my kids. And my kids are a huge part of my wellness. We do a lot together. But those are some of the main things that sort of sustain me and keep me level headed and yeah, and taking breaks. Like that's what I've gotten a lot better at. Not taking more than I can handle. Yeah.
Yeah. There's this beautiful image of you on your website of you in the water, and it looks like you're in the ocean. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, and I'm actually curious about your answer here because I know that you are a scientist and you love your research too. And I was thinking of this image of you looking like a total just ocean goddess. And then all of these people I see, myself included, cold plunging and this Huberman and the science around cold plunging and the trend of wellness versus these ancient practices that are in your lineage. Um, yeah, I think the question for me is what's your relationship sort of to both as you see these practices? It feels amazing to go and jump into the ocean. Now we see the science, the benefits are there, everyone is doing it, but it's something that is so innate and connected to you. And yeah, I'm just curious your relationship to all of it.
Yeah, well, I love science and I love learning about the science. And I mean, I think if it motivates someone to do it, I think that's great. There's so many health benefits. There's so many positive things that come from different things. And if that's, what your interest is in learning and really focusing on those sort of metrics or benefits from that standpoint, that's wonderful. So I definitely encourage people who are into that. I like learning about it. I'd like to learn more about it. And that's the same sort of benefits, on that physiological level as the heat, right? Like that cold shock to the system. And so on both sides, I think it's great. And I don't think we need to be so dualistic about things. And when I go into the ocean or into a river, I feel like a slightly different approach, maybe. Maybe the same benefits, maybe slightly different. And I have a deep reverence for that practice and the sort of process that I've been taught and that I've kind of learned intuitively from practicing. And it all takes discipline, it all takes commitment, it takes a certain amount of mental sort of toughness, if that's the right approach or word. But what I learned, especially when I mentioned earlier about being in grad school and that sort of feeling of disconnect, is like that's what I was yearning for, because I was so deeply immersed in learning about science and at that time, physical therapy. What was missing for me was the spirit and the spirituality, that spiritual connection, because it just wasn't making sense. And it just felt very compartmentalized. So that's where I really started to feel like yoga was filling my curiosity for that, because I knew there was like these other layers, these other aspects of consciousness, and how we could really influence, our health and our well-being through the power of our mind. And so the more that I'm on my path of reclamation and learning about medicines and ceremonies and our language, it's very similar, and it's all very spiritual, and it's very connected to, first and foremost, that connecting with the mind, because we can really influence so much of everything by how we perceive things and how we look at the world, and then start to just have an attitude, cultivate that sense of wellness, gratitude. So yeah, for me, it is a spiritual practice more than just the science side, but I love both.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, I do too. And I think that with all of these practices that are maybe, and we see it too in whether they're indigenous practices or with yoga, the roots of yoga, and then all of a sudden it's like the new thing that's hitting the wellness scene. That's something that is so ancient. And I think you're sort of speaking to this idea of, you're a lifelong learner, and it's really amazing to learn these things. And then there's also the intuition around these things and the way these things
Yeah.
feel. Um, I
Also,
lo-
though, I don't think that they like these practices. They are for everyone in a way, right? Like if we approach these practices with respect and humility. I've shared, and I've taken some friends, some of my South Asian friends, some of my, settler friends, and gone with other women. Often I'll go alone or with my family to do my cleansing, but I've shared, what I've learned with other people through the process, and just
yeah,
said, you can do this ceremony.
yeah,
You can. This is, you have just as every right to connect and take care of yourself with the ocean as I do,
yeah,
or just sort of like,
yeah,
it really is about intention and about
yeah,
respect and about
yeah,
connection. So I find that that's the same way that I approach yoga as well, as also understanding that it is a deeply spiritual practice, and it has a long, long thousands of years of lineage of cultural connection from India, and there are living descendants and knowledge keepers. So to be mindful of that, and how can I do things more respectfully,
yeah,
right? But knowing that we all can access different ways of connecting to spirit. There's infinite ways to connect
yeah,
spiritually. So finding what works for the next person, for yourself, is always, I think, what I'm always trying to promote is just that deeper
yeah.
connection.
Yeah, and ultimately, all of these things are such beautiful tools, and you do have to figure out what works for you. I mean, the way I approached my yoga practice when I started at age 19 to what it looks like at age 37, it's evolved so much so. And it's actually taken me a lot away from asana and into deeper philosophy. And then, sort of, when you realize and you do all of these studies, you realize that really we're all sort of saying the same thing. And it's about oneness, it's about connection, it's about reverence to the land. Um, I'm curious about your relationship with nature and seasons. And we are currently recording this podcast. It is winter. I think I see snow, maybe, or just that's a white roof behind you. But I know it's cold where you are. So just curious about living seasonally and how nature inspires you to live in accordance with what is being shown and grown or not growing, lack thereof. What does each season have to teach you?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey for me to really respect that, the
Yeah,
season. I think, we're all colonized in different ways and different layers, right? Like I would say, though, that since moving home to Alert Bay, which is, like I mentioned, northern Vancouver Island, and it's just off the mainland of the island. You have to take a ferry to get there. So we're really just this tiny little island, no more than 1,000 people, boat access only, kind of ferry access only. And so you really start to respect firstly the ocean, and the winds. So you get a little bit more in tune with that. And we have frequent power outages, and it is really humbling. And knowing that we don't have, had an experience that growing up in Vancouver. So you have to be more prepared. I wouldn't say I'm the best at that. Luckily, my husband is really mindful, and that's his jam. He's like super duper prepared and on it with those things, and he's been really encouraging me, especially, he's a hunter, so he wants me to go out and go hunting with him. And yeah, just so respecting the elements and respecting the changes, and sometimes it can happen really drastically. One of my ambitions this year is to learn how to drive a boat, and so I'm gonna have to learn a lot more about the tides, and about, so many things to be able to go where I need to go to navigate. And our people always knew these things. And so I feel like, okay, I've got a lot to learn. I've got a lot to pick up, and I want to do it relatively quickly, but with humility and respect and safely, especially if I'm going to be with my family. So, yeah, just really respecting the elements has been a big thing. And like I mentioned, just living in accordance with the shifts in the seasons, and taking care of myself and my family's wellness according to, our where we are in the seasons. And we've gotten a lot more connected to the foods that we eat and harvest. And fortunately, we have still a lot of support from our community with, we're a huge salmon community. We've been thriving on salmon since time immemorial. And living in, connected to salmon has been a big part of my own journey of reclamation, and preparing foods. And, we don't live the same way that my ancestors lived. We still have a grocery store, and, our store isn't as well stocked as maybe the next. We don't have things, like Whole Foods and whatnot. It's very limited. But I think just for me, it's learning how to orient myself and my family more towards living with the resources that we have, and being prepared for when we don't have certain things. And we learned a lot through that with the pandemic and being in an isolated community, and just a lot of big changes. I could go on in other layers about that with, big industry and things. But for the most part, really connecting to where we are, the resources that we have, and how to try to live more harmoniously with that and attuned to that, has been a big aspect of being home, and a big reason why we want to stay home, because it just feels a lot more attuned. And getting out in our territory, which is sometimes hard because, like I mentioned, a lot of our nations, a lot of our villages, especially our traditional village sites, are all not easy to access. There, a lot of them are boat access. Sometimes there's no, functional docks there, or sometimes we have to go out deep into the valley. So that it's just making that effort. And just like I mentioned with sadhana, it takes commitment, it takes discipline, it also takes resources, and just that interest and passion to want to know more and learn more.
Mm.
Mhm.
What is your relationship to, and you can put your words to this, creator, spirit, God, universe, and how much of that is sort of your own, from your own ancestral line to your own discoveries of maybe what that connection feels like for you?
That's a deep question. Um, so I believe in creator, and I think it's the source of what is the same for all people who believe in maybe a higher source. Can call it what you want. One of my elders, Dave Frank from House, it says, whether it's Jesus or Allah or creator or whoever you believe in, whatever God that you believe in, it's all that connection, that interconnection, that oneness is there. And sometimes, for the most part in our everyday society, we don't necessarily always see those connections. There's a lot of unseen to the spiritual realm. And in our language, that's the Nawalok, the supernatural, that spirit, that spiritual sort of connection. And so, it has evolved definitely, and it continues to evolve. I wouldn't say I have certain like gifts, like, my husband has these visions, he sees certain things. I don't have that same way of connecting to spirit that he does. He's an artist and he sees differently than I do. But I have these deep moments of, I'd say I'm coming more into my womanhood and my intuition of really being attuned to this, not only my intuition, but a sense of connection to that voice, or it could be an ancestor's voice or protection. But it's often, I pray to Creator, and there's a few different words in Kwakwa. It's one of them is Bakwila Inuk, and that's like my maker, the creator of things. And so I pray often, and I have a lot of faith in this, source. Pray for mostly guidance and direction, and I pray for, not only for myself and my children and my family, but for the community and for the larger world, the people that I don't know, my non-human kin, all the animals and Mother Earth. So I really, that worldview, that connection of what I think has been lost in our societies, that we're so self-centered as human beings, that we think we are above everything. And we're really not. And, you just go out and you get humbled very quickly, and that's where I've done things that have really strengthened and reaffirmed that humility, by going out and doing fasting. And I didn't get to go this winter, but last winter we went out to one of our the islands not too far from Alert Bay, but again is boat access only, where we have a cabin there. Our nation has a cabin there. And I started my fast just right around leading up to the winter solstice, and that was something else, to be, alone, and you don't have like a tent. You're on the land. You have to build and keep your own fire, and no food and water. And the storm rolled in, so I didn't actually get to fulfill the 4 days that I was hoping to do. But it was still a very deeply humbling experience. And like, even just starting and keeping a fire in the dead of winter, it's like, yeah, that's something where you're gonna be praying pretty hard to steady. So I was singing and asking for help from loved ones that have passed on, and guidance, and praying for dreams and things to come. So yeah, I don't know. And that has been taught to me through the different teachers that I've had, not only in my own community, in my own family, but in Sundance, in sweat lodges, and in fasting ceremonies, and in like I said, Native American church and other outlets. And I've been really blessed to have a lot of amazing teachers on my path who have guided me and reaffirmed just how beautiful having faith is in that higher power, especially when life can be so cruel and there's so much suffering and there's so much pain. But when we really believe and have hope, and we pray, and we have this community who can support and witness that and pray with us, the power that happens when we bring our minds together in that type of setting, miracles happen and lives change, and people can be healed, and things happen, and that I can't explain. And that is, the great mystery of it all. And that's sort of the seeking that I have always been curious about, through not only just prayer and ceremony, but through yoga. That practice is also, it's also a prayer for me to be able to practice that way too.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. That's one of the most beautiful explanations. This is my favorite question I ask everyone, not just on the podcast, but in life, because you get so many different answers. But to me, what I'm hearing, you're speaking to this idea of like the mystery of it all. You know, we live in such a convenient world, most of us, and in a very nuclear world where, you know, we don't have the village around us, we don't have this sort of multi-generational living anymore, and we're sort of so stripped from all of that, and stripped from um, the connection to self, connection to other, and connection to something greater. um, and I love what you said about, you know, I can just imagine, yeah, being out there in the cold, trying to keep a fire lit. And it's like, yeah, you don't have your phone. You can't distract yourself. Uber Eats is not coming to the island. You know, then you might discover that prayer and asking for protection and support and guidance is what's needed. And I think maybe so many of us have not been in situations where we've had to sort of metaphorically or literally hit our knees and ask. Um, and to me, prayer and the spiritual practice really is the releasing of control. I'm not in control. I don't know. I'm in a co-creation with you, but show me and reveal to me. And I know times where that connection has felt fuzzy or not as reachable. And so the discipline aspect that you've been speaking to is so important. It is a discipline, to me anyways, to show up to my meditation, to my prayer, to my journaling, to my time in nature, to peel myself away from my laptop or my phone, or even my own thoughts. We get so addicted to our own suffering and our own sort of self-pity, where it takes discipline to sort of uproot ourselves from all of that and choose something different. And to me, nature is the where I go first, because it's the most obvious that God exists there. And then I can sort of reinvigorate my connection, my faith,
Mhm.
to something greater, and walking. Then I feel like I'm not walking the path alone anymore.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And that's, and hopefully, we don't always have to be brought to our knees to start to have a little faith, right? And I think that's where prayer helps me too. And when we're not just turning to that practice or that outlet when things are tough. And
Yeah.
that's what we're really trying to instill in our daughters. So at dinner time, we say a prayer, we say what we're grateful for, and we're very intentional about eating our meals together, especially family dinner is really big in our house. And we'll often, put a little spirit plate out. And if we're having something, like a nice dinner, then we'll make sure that we're putting a plate and we're putting, a side of everything together with some tobacco, and we make an offering and we put that fire. We have a wood burning stove, so we'll make offerings, and we're teaching our kids that, and that that's how we sustain ourselves and we sustain our ancestors and we sustain that connection to creator, is not just by always asking, and it's also by being just grateful and also taking care of them, because there's ways that we can do that, and there's different ways in other cultures, not just the way that I've described, of how that can be done. And so just encouraging people to also, as you turn to your faith, turn to your prayers in really good times, and not just the hard times and the challenging times when you're putting yourself in the elements, if you ever do that, which is good. It's really, there's a lot of little moments of joy as well, and things that happen, and curiosities. And that's why I love, the Sundance so much, was that it was just this beautiful time and just this potent time to just go deep into, like you said, that pity sense of just huge, like self-pity, and just sort of like, and then you just kind of like look at yourself and have to really dig deep, and then you kind of move through it, and then you start thinking about other people and the bigger world and that greater suffering, and sort of, that's the sacrifice. And I think if more of us did a little bit more of that sacrifice, um, for others,
Yeah.
we would be a lot better off in this
Mm,
world.
agreed.
Mhm.
Agreed. We're coming to a close, and I'm curious, what are you grateful for right now, just in light of, you know, that attention to gratitude, and or I think you said the attitude of cultivating gratitude. What lights you up right now? What are you feeling most grateful for?
I'm really grateful for my family. Um, Truly grateful for, having two healthy daughters and a loving husband, a safe home, a community where I feel, seen and loved and respected. Um, and I'm grateful for, my extended family as part of that. I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful every day I open my eyes and I have, this beautiful sunshine today. Yesterday I had a bit of a scary drive down, so I'm grateful for safe travels and safe passages, and I'm really grateful for this new opportunity I have to teach. And I'll start my first class teaching at UBC tomorrow, or no, actually today. Yeah, this afternoon. So I'm really excited. I have over 60 students and over a dozen people on the wait list. And one of my TAs has been a dear friend of mine for the last almost 20 years. So I'm
Wow.
super excited about just that opportunity to shape some um, discussions and space for learning about Indigenous people, especially in this class, Indigeneity in the City. So I have so much to be grateful. I could go on and on, but those are a few things. And I'm grateful to just have space and time and resources to have these practices and to be learning my language and more about who I am and where I come from. So those are things that are really just filling my cup and keeping me humble and keeping me accountable.
Mm. Thank you for that. And thank you for your time. I didn't realize today is your first day. So, wishing you so much luck. And um, those 60 students are so lucky to have you and learn from you. And to be in conversation with you, Jessica, always feels like a healing, or I feel deeper in my own heart sitting with you. And we've been in person in spaces and online in spaces. And it's always just such a joy to be in your frequency and the energy that you offer the world. So thank you for making time for me today. And I'm so excited for people to listen to this and to learn from you.
Thank you, Ali. And thank you again for the invitation. And it's just been just so wonderful getting to know you and learning from you. And you've really inspired me with your path as well. So thank you for your teachings and the space that you've held for me, because it makes a difference, not only for my wellness, but, for my family and for my community. So just appreciate
Mm,
all the work that you're doing, and
mm,
congratulations on everything that you've
thank you.
accomplished, are going to be doing, and wishing you safe travels and just a joyful journey of learning.
Mm, thank you. And for people that want to learn more about your work and yeah, what you're up to, where can they find you?
My website's probably the best place to do that. It's Jessica Barudin, BARUDIN.com. Yeah.
Awesome. Great.
Mhm.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you. I like yourself.